The inheritance is pretty small. Let's get a divorce.
I can't believe you're the one bringing up our divorce.
You've been wanting a divorce for ages, haven't you? Now that Samantha's gone, there's no point in staying married. Honestly, it's a shame. I wish Samantha had more savings. Guess too much went to her medical bills. What a waste.
At those words, something inside me snapped. The way he spoke, as if my mom's medical expenses had been wasted, was the last straw. That's it. I can't take this anymore. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my ragged breathing fueled by anger. Then, with a trembling voice, I spoke. Enough. You've been saying selfish things nonstop. I can't forgive you anymore. I don't want to share the same legal status with you for even one more second. Grabbing the divorce paper, I filled it out at lightning speed.
Hey, make sure not to touch the household savings. We'll need to have a proper discussion about asset division later.
Of course, I won't touch the household savings. After kicking John out of the house, I took the divorce papers and headed straight to submit them. If you're cutting ties with someone you can't trust, it has to be done completely. Goodbye, John. I'm Emma, 50 years old. I'm married but don't have any kids. Unfortunately, we weren't blessed with children. But now, looking back, maybe that was for the best. Taking care of my husband, John, while raising kids would have been far harder than I imagined. John and I got married about 20 years ago. We met through a mutual friend. As my quirky banker friend had warned me, John was a bit of an unusual person. He's laid back and incredibly blunt, saying whatever was on his mind, even to me, someone he'd just met. I found John hard to deal with, but for some reason, he seemed to like me and pursued me passionately over and over.
Emma, someone like me is perfect for you. I'll make you happy, I swear. I'm confident I can keep you entertained.
Initially, I was cautious, but eventually, his bold self-assurance wore me down, and we started dating. Even after we began dating, John remained as laid back as ever, but over time, I got used to it. In fact, as someone who tends to overthink and worry about others, I found being with John relaxing. Because he was so direct, I didn't feel the need to tiptoe around him, and that created a unique sense of comfort for me. We ended up getting married, and the deciding factor was that John agreed to take my last name. At the time, my dad had already passed away in an accident, and my mom, Samantha, was living alone. Technically, my family included my younger brother, Mike. However, I was worried about not being able to keep an eye on my mom if I moved out. On this point, John was very understanding.
I've got 2 brothers, and my family lives far away, so there's no need for visits or keeping up with them. Honestly, I haven't been back home in years. I don't care about family names or traditions, so just do what works for you, Emma.
Even after we're married, I like to visit my mom often. Is that okay?
Of course, but I'm not going with you, all right? Dealing with family can be exhausting. No family obligations for either of us.
Those conditions couldn't have been more perfect for me. And with that, I decided to marry John. Our married life felt like an extension of dating and wasn't bad at all. Though we lived together, we kept our own pace. It was an unconventional arrangement, but I liked it. I could visit my mom regularly, which gave me peace of mind. However, 10 years later, my mom was diagnosed with a serious illness. With all the paperwork and arrangements, Mike and I were constantly busy. Sorry, I'll be staying at my mom's place again tonight and won't be home.
Fine. But just so you know, I can't do housework. So don't complain if the house is a mess.
It was true. Since we got married, John hadn't done any housework at all. I didn't mind doing housework, so I hadn't said anything up until now. But honestly, during such a difficult time, I really wished he could handle things on his own. However, I felt it was partly my fault for not suggesting sharing the housework earlier, so I swallowed my words. Every few days, I would go home to prepare meals in advance, clean, and do the laundry. Then I'd return to my mom's place to stay by her side, repeating this routine. The doctor says mom probably doesn't have much time left. She's fighting so hard though.
I see. Don't worry about me. Just stay by Samantha's side and take care of her.
Thank you. John didn't do any housework, and even after learning about my mom's illness, he never visited her. But I appreciated that he told me I didn't need to worry about him. However, I soon discovered John's real motives.
I'm so sorry. It'll never happen again.
While I was busy with taking care of my mom, working, and managing the house, John was having an affair. I found out when I came home unannounced one day and ran into his mistress. That explained why he was so indifferent to me and didn't mind my being away. In fact, it worked perfectly for them. Of course, the first thing that came to mind was divorce, but surprisingly, John refused.
I'm sorry. I'll never do it again. So please, don't divorce me. I'm begging you.
With tears and snot streaming down his face as he apologized, I couldn't help but feel a little sorry for him. On top of that, I also felt a bit guilty for neglecting John too much. This is your one and only chance.
Thank you.
Since John had spent some of our household money on his affair, we agreed to continue our marriage under the condition that I would take full control of the finances, including his salary. Maybe I felt some sympathy for John, seeing him refuse divorce so desperately, even to the point of crying. However, the allowance system seemed to hit John pretty hard.
As a banker, I handle huge amounts of money at work, but I'm stuck with just this much to spend. The gap between dreams and reality is cruel. Maybe I should take out a loan or something. But if I did, you would be furious.
He started making snide remarks like that. At first, I tried to laugh it off or pretend I didn't hear him, but after hearing it over and over, it became incredibly irritating. If you're so unhappy, let's just get a divorce. Sometimes I'd snap at him like that. Despite all his complaints, John clearly had no intention of divorcing me and would apologize every time.
I was just joking. I got carried away. I'm sorry. Please, anything but divorce.
I was beyond fed up, but between my mom's illness and everything else going on, I didn't have the energy to go through the process of convincing John to divorce. And so, despite everything, we continued our marriage. A few months later, my mom passed away, with Mike and me by her side. From the wake to the funeral, we were constantly on the move. When everything was finally over, I felt relieved yet completely drained. Even though I knew I had to start cleaning up the house, I just couldn't bring myself to move. Surprisingly, even John, who had always been reluctant to visit my mom's place, offered to come along this time. Thinking about how much he had avoided coming before, I accepted his offer. Since Mike had to travel out of state for work for a few days, I decided to tackle some cleaning at the house with John during that time. Sorry, but there are a lot of things here I don't want anyone touching without permission. Could I ask you to clean the yard and hallway instead?
Sure. By the way, this is one huge house.
With that, we both started cleaning our respective areas. However, a few hours later, I was shocked by the sight before me and couldn't help but shout. "What on earth are you doing?" I couldn't keep my voice calm. John was rummaging through my mom's drawers. On the nearby table, several of my mom's bank cards were carelessly piled on top of each other. It was clear they had been tossed there haphazardly by John. The proof was in the fact that he was still holding another bank cards, intently staring at its contents. "Stop it. Don't touch those without permission." I snatched the bank cards from his hand, anger evident in my voice. But John seemed completely unbothered.
I was just looking. Besides,
He glanced at the bank cards on the table, let out a derisive snort, and shrugged exaggeratedly.
the inheritance is pretty small. Let's get a divorce.
"What?" Confused, I tilted my head, and John responded with a smug, sly grin. "Inheritance? Are you talking about my mom's estate?"
Yeah,
John nodded.
you know, your family's house is massive. I noticed it before we got married and thought the inheritance would be substantial. But now that I've checked, none of these accounts have more than a few $100s. It doesn't seem like the inheritance is worth much after all.
As he spoke nonchalantly, with a shameless grin, I was left utterly stunned. What is he even saying? We just finished my mom's funeral amidst our grief, and now, finally catching a moment to breathe, he's sneaking a look at her bank cards and complaining about the inheritance being too small. How could he say something so heartless to me, her daughter, and his wife?
I don't even know yet what my mom left behind. But regardless, even if you are my husband, you don't have any right to her inheritance. The audacity to expect an inheritance without caring for her is absolutely appalling. I don't have inheritance rights? Of course, I know that. It's common sense. I just figured if you got a substantial amount, you could invest it. Lately, my coworkers have been doing well, landing big contracts. So, I thought I'd follow suit. That's why I stuck around and didn't push for divorce. But clearly, it was a waste of time.
In short, John had been banking on the inheritance I might receive. Anger started bubbling inside me. His attitude, as if he'd been waiting for my mom to pass for money, was infuriating.
I need to close a big deal soon.
John muttered to himself as he walked into the next room, then returned waving a piece of paper in his hand. I took a closer look. It was a divorce application. This is
A divorce paper. I've already filled out my part. All you need to do is sign it and submit it. Have fun.
I can't believe you're the one bringing up divorce.
You've been wanting a divorce for ages, haven't you? Now that Samantha's gone, there's no point in staying married. Honestly, it's a shame. I wish Samantha had more savings. Guess too much went to her medical bills. What a waste.
At those words, something inside me snapped. The way he spoke, as if my mom's medical expenses had been wasted, was the last straw. That's it. I can't take this anymore. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my ragged breathing fueled by anger. Then, with a trembling voice, I spoke. Enough. You've been saying selfish things nonstop. I can't forgive you anymore. I don't want to share the same legal status with you for even one more second. Grabbing the divorce paper, I filled it out at lightning speed. All I wanted was to become a stranger to John as quickly as possible. After finishing, I carefully reviewed everything to ensure there were no mistakes. It seemed there weren't any issues. Okay, I think it's all set. I'm going to file this immediately.
So, I'm single again? Finally, single. I'm kind of excited about it.
John hummed cheerfully, clearly in high spirits. It was hard to believe this was the same man who had cried and begged every time I'd caught him cheating, refusing divorce at all costs. His sudden suggestion of divorce was suspicious. I could only guess, but maybe his new affair partner had pressured him into marriage. Still, he had dragged out our marriage up until now because he was counting on my mom's inheritance. I had never shared anything with John about my family's home or assets. However, from just a single visit to my parents' house, he must have picked up on the fact that we were financially comfortable. He also knew my mom was seriously ill and wouldn't live much longer. To him, my family must have seemed like an easy target. But when he realized there wasn't as much money as he'd hoped, he quickly decided to cut ties with me. If we got divorced, he would at least receive a portion of the marital assets. Rajan, who currently had all his finances managed by me, even that must have seemed appealing.
Hey, make sure not to touch the household savings. We'll need to have a proper discussion about asset division later.
Of course, I won't touch the household savings. After kicking John out of the house, I took the divorce papers and headed straight to submit it. The divorce papers were processed without any issues. That felt surprisingly quick. Feeling relieved, I set out for my next destination. When cutting ties with someone untrustworthy, it's crucial to sever all connections completely. Everything had to be wrapped up.
Thank you for waiting.
I had arrived at the bank where John worked. I handed the necessary documents to the teller, who greeted me with a cheerful and lovely smile and stated my request clearly. I'd like to close this account.
Understood.
The woman accepted the papers with a pleasant smile, but after reviewing them, she let out a small gasp and quickly covered her mouth in shock.
Well, you'd like to close this account?
Yes. I nodded without hesitation. The corporate account was $700 million, please.
Of course, I'm so sorry. Please wait just a moment, or rather for a while.
As the flustered teller rushed to the back, I silently apologized. Sorry to shock you, you've done nothing wrong. After a short while, the woman returned with Chris, the branch manager. The anxious expression on Chris's face made it clear he was extremely tense.
Emma, thank you for your continued patronage. I understand you're here to close your account today, but if you don't mind, could you share the reason for this decision?
The reason? I had met Chris a few times before. However, in both instances, it was primarily Mike who handled the interactions. so he likely didn't remember much about me. It was obvious how bewildered Chris was, unsure of how to persuade me not to close the account. Seeing him so visibly shaken didn't seem ideal for someone in a leadership position, but I couldn't help feeling a bit sympathetic. I've come to believe this bank is untrustworthy.
Surely, none of our employees could have made such a mistake.
It's not a work-related issue, but rather a personal one. I can't leave my important money in a bank where someone would look at another person's bank account without permission, even if it belongs to a family member.
Who would do such a thing?
At my words, Chris's expression shifted, his eyes showing more anger than confusion. There was no need to go into detail. I wanted to enforce the account closure without discussion, but it didn't seem like Chris would accept that without an explanation. After a brief hesitation, I decided to explain. The issue stems from John, who works here. He was my husband, though we are now divorced. As I mentioned earlier, I cannot trust him. For that reason, I'm afraid I must sever all ties with this bank as long as he remains employed here. When I firmly stated my decision, a furrow appeared on Chris's brow. His expression was a mix of confusion, anger, and disappointment.
I've known John for a few years now and have a general sense of his character. With all due respect, I understand what you're saying, Emma.
Behind him, the female teller nodded silently in agreement. This surprised me. I had always thought John was good at his job, but it seemed he was also considered a problematic figure at work.
Emma, I apologize for troubling you when you're clearly busy, but could I ask for a little more of your time?
Chris's voice, now strong and resolute, was the complete opposite of my initial impression of him. Moved by his sincerity, I decided to accept his request. I was led to a private room and asked to wait. Less than 10 minutes later, loud voices could be heard outside the room.
Why would you call me in on my day off? Chris, you're here. You can handle most things yourself.
The brash, arrogant tone belonged to none other than John, my husband, until just this morning. As I had suspected, Chris must have called him in. It wasn't clear whether Chris planned to persuade him or make him apologize to me. What exactly does Chris intend to do? As I sipped the coffee they had provided, a particularly loud noise interrupted my thoughts, followed by John shouting,
This is ridiculous. This is tyranny. Why should I be reassigned to a different branch? That's it. I'm filing a complaint with headquarters.
His heavy, angry footsteps echoed down the hallway, indicating he had stormed out.
Wait, this conversation isn't over, and keep your voice down. We're open for business, and there are customers present.
Don't act high and mighty just because you're my boss. I don't care which customer filed a complaint. It's pure retaliation. I've done my job properly. There's no way I'll accept a sudden reassignment like this.
In the hallway, a heated argument ensued between Chris, who was trying to bring John back into the room, and John, who was determined to leave.
I've told you this repeatedly. You need to take your clients more seriously. And that's not the only issue.
Come on. It's probably just some weird customer filing a complaint, right? Who is it? Just give me their name. I'll go confront them.
It seemed Chris hadn't mentioned my name, choosing instead to address John as his subordinate. Feeling a bit guilty, I finally decided to leave the room slowly and confront the situation.
What? Emma? Why?
John gawked at me, his mouth slightly open in surprise. For now, could you step into the room? You're causing quite a scene out here. John begrudgingly followed and sat down in the room where I'd been waiting. He immediately slouched into a chair.
So, why are you here, Emma? Don't tell me you couldn't handle the divorce and decided to storm in here.
His absurd assumption left me dumbfounded. Of course not. I'm just here to close my account.
Oh, so you don't want to leave your money in a bank where I work? That's so petty. You're as bitter and clingy as ever. And what? Did my being called in have to do with your little account closure? All this trouble over you closing your account.
Completely unaware of my corporate account, John quickly played the victim and turned to Chris.
Come on, Chris. I know you can be overly sentimental, but calling me in on my day off just because she's my ex? It's just a personal account closure. Who cares? Just process it and move on. Let's just get it over with now.
The way he talks to Chris. How disrespectful. Even though it wasn't during his business hours, I was stunned. He talks to Chris just like he talked to me at home, and calling it just a personal account, unbelievable, especially for a banker. As I watched, appalled, Chris stood next to John, who was sitting smugly in the chair, his clenched fist trembling.
Just process it quickly. Do you have any idea how serious this is?
Chris, are you bad at handling account closures or something? If that's the case, just ask someone else.
Before John could finish his smirking remark, Chris cut him off with a shout.
It's a $700 million corporate account. Do you have any idea what this means?
What?
John's usually narrow eyes widened in shock.
$700 million?
Seeing Chris breathing heavily with a tense expression, John finally seemed to realize the gravity of the situation. His mouth twitched nervously as he turned to me and asked,
No, this doesn't make sense. Emma couldn't possibly. And a corporate account? That's ridiculous.
John's expression practically begged me to deny it. As he looked at me with confusion and desperation, I responded with a bright smile. Well, let me formally introduce myself. For the past 5 years, I've been the CEO of a group of 13 companies, a position I inherited from my mom. We won't be seeing each other anymore.
You are a CEO. That's a lie. No way.
For John, who rarely visited my family home and actively avoided interacting with my family, this revelation must have been a shock. My parents had started their business when I got married. While my dad wasn't great with details, he excelled at building relationships. On the other hand, my mom was brilliant but less socially inclined. Together, they made the perfect team. The business quickly grew, expanding operations until they were running 13 companies. I can only imagine how difficult it was for them to balance raising 2 kids while achieving such success. Mike and I never originally intended to take over the company, but we wanted to support our parents in the future, so we decided to pursue careers in the same industry. Our goal was to gain the skills to help them when the time came. Just as we'd become proficient in our respective jobs, tragedy struck. My dad passed away in an accident. Given how close my parents were, my mom must have been devastated. Seeing her so disheartened, Mike and I decided to leave our jobs and join the family business. It was around that time that I met and married John. Originally, I intended to tell him about the company after we got married, but my mom expressed reservations.
He seems like a cheerful, personable guy, but I just don't feel comfortable with him. I'm sorry, but could we keep the company a secret from him?
It was surprising to hear my mom, who rarely spoke ill of others, say something like that. He's a banker, so if he starts asking for strange loans or favors, it could become a problem. Let's just keep it under wraps. After discussing it with Mike, we decided to keep the company a secret for the time being. Fortunately, John had no interest in visiting my family home and actively avoided engaging with my side of the family, so the risk of him finding out was minimal. When my mom's illness was discovered, Mike and I discussed who should take over the company. We wanted her to focus on her treatment. I originally intended for Mike to take over, but at their request, I ended up becoming the successor. When I finished speaking, John blinked rapidly, as if he couldn't believe what he had just heard.
So, you're saying you now have $700 million?
In the company's account, to be precise.
You've got to be kidding me.
John let out a cry of joy, as if he had just won the lottery.
What the heck? That's amazing. We're not just talking about a millionaire here. $700 million?
His voice rose in pitch with excitement, and his eyes sparkled with enthusiasm. Why is he so excited about someone else's $700 million? He's completely carried away. I need to bring him back to reality. So, today, I'm here to close that $700 million account. John froze in place.
Close it? Why?
Why doesn't he understand? I almost wanted to ask him the same thing. Did he already forget what he said just a few minutes ago? You literally said it yourself earlier. It's because this bank is your workplace. I'm too bitter and clingy to leave my money in a bank where you work.
Well, yeah. But, Emma, isn't that kind of a hassle?
John mumbled awkwardly, clearly unable to form a proper response. It was obvious his mind was entirely consumed by the thought of $700 million. I've been thinking about it for a while now. We're strangers to each other.
Strangers? Wait, you don't mean. Did you already file the divorce papers?
Yes, and they've been officially processed.
But you just filled them out earlier. This has to be a joke.
His face was filled with panic as he grabbed my shoulder. I quickly brushed his hand away. I wanted to separate from you as soon as possible. You were on board with it too.
No. My $700 million.
John slumped forward in defeat, but he quickly lifted his head and looked at me pleadingly.
Can't you reconsider?
What?
Now that Samantha is gone, I think you really need me, Emma. Managing $700 million is a huge task, right? As a banker, I could help in so many ways. Don't close the account. Just leave it to me.
How can he so easily spout things he doesn't even mean? That's exactly why I'm saying I can't leave it to you. I'm here to close the account.
If John were no longer involved, would you be willing to continue banking with us?
It was Chris's firm voice that cut into the conversation. Yes, I've been satisfied with your services so far, so as long as John isn't involved. A look of panic crossed John's face. It seemed he had realized something.
No way, Chris. Are you really throwing me for $700 million? Like I said before, you can't just do something so outrageous. I'll take this to headquarters.
Chris sighed and gave John a cold stare.
You seem to be seriously mistaken. The transfer order came from headquarters and has nothing to do with Emma. It's due to your behavior. This has been an issue for some time, and I've tried to handle it on my end, but it seems that was unrealistic.
What?
You've been mishandling interactions with key clients. Complaints against you aren't isolated cases. Moreover,
Chris glanced at me briefly before continuing.
apologies, Emma.
I tilted my head in confusion as Chris directed a sharp glare at John.
One of the reasons for your transfer is that you've been involved with a female employee despite being married.
John's face turned pale instantly. His mouth opened and closed like a fish, but no words came out. So, you really were cheating?
No, it was just. I was just giving her work advice.
I've spoken to the woman in question. She admitted everything. She claimed you told her not to worry because you'd be getting a divorce soon.
John's eyes widened in shock, his expression betraying his guilt. My suspicions had been right all along. So that's why he was so eager to finalize the divorce. I'll need to hear more about that. I'll be demanding appropriate compensation from both you and that woman.
Compensation? Wait a second.
John's lips trembled slightly. He tried to force a sycophantic smile, but it didn't quite work.
It was just a fling. Nothing serious with her. Emma, you're the only one for me. Please.
As he reached out toward me for help, I quickly stepped away. Losing his balance, John toppled forward, hitting the floor headfirst with a loud thud.
Ouch.
Whether it was a fling or something serious with her, it doesn't matter to me, but I'll make sure you pay the compensation. Oh, and maybe I should ask my lawyer about the damages for your previous affairs as well. Realizing the potential financial consequences, John's face turned even paler, tears welling up in his eyes.
That was in the past. Please, Emma, I'm begging you.
No matter how desperately he pleaded, I felt nothing. I'm tired of seeing that look. Your apologies are so shallow. It's obvious they lack sincerity. You think just saying sorry is enough, don't you? I used to think his apologies meant he was truly sorry, but I now understood I was wrong. John wasn't apologizing out of remorse. He was only doing it for the $700 million.
But without me, how will you manage everything on your own?
What are you talking about now? We've always had a hands-off relationship. Besides, I have Mike to help me. We'll work together and handle it just fine. You, on the other hand, should focus on doing your best at your new assignment, for the sake of paying those damages. John was left speechless, shaking his head vigorously. As I turned to leave, he scrambled to his feet in a panic, only to trip and fall, hitting his cheek on the floor.
Wait, Emma.
I'll decide on the next steps depending on John's situation. I apologize for causing such a disturbance.
Understood. I'll be in touch with you soon. Thank you for your patience.
As I walked away, I thought I heard John crying and yelling in the distance, but I decided to leave everything in Chris's hands from that point on. Not long after, I received a call from Chris. It seems John had been transferred to another branch, just as planned. At first, he seemed to resist, but it appeared that the commotion from that day had been overheard by other employees, and the cold stares from those around him were unmistakable. Even while working, He was whispered about, and people gave him suspicious looks just as he walked by. Even John couldn't handle it, and he eventually accepted the transfer. I thought he might continue his relationship with the woman, but it seemed she lost interest in him after his career took a nosedive, and she ended things. Of course, I made sure to claim compensation from both parties. John was so defeated that he agreed without much resistance. The woman hesitated at first, but fearing the situation would escalate, she reluctantly agreed. The friend who had introduced John to me apologized, but I told her it wasn't her fault. It was simply that I had poor judgment when it came to men. By the way, according to my friend, John was so down after everything that he had lost a lot of weight and looked like a different person. There was even a request from him for a reconciliation, but my friend firmly turned him down. I've been leading a steady life. Even when I was married to John, I didn't feel like I was in dire straits, but I was still likely burdened by something.
You've been looking so much more lively since your divorce.
Mike even said that to me. After my mom passed away and my divorce from John, I used up a lot of my energy, but for the sake of the employees who believe in me and continue to support me, I've decided to keep giving it my all.